Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. Beth has cancer. She wishes to see her parents reconnect before dying. Bold and beautiful. Beth Spencer's world turned upside down when the faint aches in her bones turned into the worst news a child could bear. The doctors at University Hospital in Los Angeles diagnosed her with an aggressive form of leukemia. And at only a tender young age, she faced more hospital walls and sterile beeping machines than playgrounds and sunny days. Her golden curls that Hope Logan loved to braid had started to thin, and her once bright eyes carried a quiet wisdom that no child should be forced to learn, the kind that comes only when you hear whispered words like chemotherapy, bone marrow transplant, and limited time left echo in hushed tones down sterile hallways. Liam Spencer, her father, crumpled to his knees when Bridget Forrester handed him the medical chart with the devastating results. And Hope nearly collapsed into Ridge's arms as Brooke sobbed, knowing that this was the kind of tragedy that reshapes entire families, pulling them together and tearing them apart in one cruel twist. Yet amid the tubes and four lines, Beth found her voice and in a fragile, trembling whisper that broke the hearts of everyone present, including Steffi Forrester, who had been hovering in the doorway with Finn, torn between rivalry and raw humanity. Beth said the only thing she wanted before she died was to see her mommy and daddy, Hope and Liam, be a family again together under one roof, reading her bedtime stories like before, tucking her in as one and not as fractured. Visitors rotating in and out of her hospital room. This single wish rippled through the Forrester, Logan, and Spencer clans like an earthquake. Carter Walton put his engagement to Hope on ice, his ring feeling like a shackle now that a dying child's plea had been laid bare. Steffi, who had just begun to warm up to the idea of reuniting with Liam after the chaos of Finn's emotional distance and the scars of Sheila Carter's violent interventions, felt her heart sink as Liam's devotion to Beth overshadowed every other bond in his life. Bill Spencer, the powerful patriarch, stormed into the oncology wing and swore he would buy the best treatments money could find, from European clinical trials to private specialists flown in from Switzerland, even reaching out secretly to Poppy Nozoa despite Lee Finnegan's deep mistrust of her unconventional methods. Because this wasn't about grudges anymore. It was about saving the light of their family. Meanwhile, Thomas Forrester returned from Paris upon hearing the news, torn between his desire to support Hope and his lingering feelings for her. But he too couldn't deny that Beth's dying wish was pure and undeniable. She wanted the parents who brought her into the world to stand beside her, hand in hand as her strength waned. Nights grew long with hospital vigils where Hope laid her head against Liam's shoulder, their old warmth flickering in the sterile glow as Beth slept beside them, tiny fingers clutching their hands in a fragile bridge of what once was. Even Ridge, so often a man of steel and fashion, found himself shaken, telling Taylor Hayes over the phone that for once, all the rivalries, all the designer feuds, all the history meant nothing if a child's final days were spent in heartbreak instead of love. As treatments failed one by one, Finn offered experimental immunotherapy, but warned it might by only months, not years. And in those months, the entire family dynamic shifted. Brooke and Steffi called a truce. Sheila stood outside the hospital doors with tears streaking her face, whispering that no child, not even one tied to the Logan name, deserved such a fate, and Wyatt Spencer began to wonder if his brother Liam was about to make the most permanent, soul-altering decision of his life. Not for love as he knew it before, but for love in its rawest, most sacrificial form. The love of a parent willing to set aside his future to honor his daughter's dying heart as Christmas lights went up. Around the city, the Forrester mansion held a somber holiday where Beth, wrapped in a pink blanket, asked to sit between Hope and Liam by the fire, her four stand trailing beside her. And in that moment, their eyes met, not as co-parents in a tangled web of past marriages, but as two halves of a broken heart being stitched together by the tiniest, bravest soul they had ever known. Whispers of a rushed wedding swirled. Brooke offered her ring. Bill offered his jet to fly in a private chaplain. Carter stepped aside in noble heartbreak. Steffi looked on from the balcony with silent tears, And even Ivy Forrester sent a letter from Australia saying she understood. Because this wasn't about winning or losing, it was about a little girl's wish before the sand in her hourglass ran dry. As the days bled into nights and the sterile white walls of Beth's hospital room became the reluctant home for the Spencer-Logan-Forrester triangle, the ripple effects only grew deeper, because every heartbeat of the child became a ticking clock that dictated the choices of grown men and women who had fought, loved, betrayed, and forgiven each other more times than they could count. Hope would sit by Beth's bedside, humming the lullabies her mother Brooke used to sing, while Liam massaged Beth's little hands, careful not to disturb the 4-port taped to her fragile skin. And in those quiet hours when the machines beeped steadily and the world outside the window blurred into LA lights, their fingers would brush, their shoulders would touch, and the ghosts of their love would whisper louder than ever. Memories of cabin nights in Big Bear, of weddings under Forrester arches, of the first time they held Beth after believing her lost forever. Meanwhile, Steffi fought the hardest battle of her life, not against an external enemy, but against the hollowing ache in her chest as she watched Liam slip away emotionally, not because of betrayal or anger, but because of something she couldn't fight, a dying child's plea, a daughter that wasn't hers by blood, but whom she had once held close like family. Finn, ever the healer, tried to bridge that gap, counseling Steffi that sometimes love meant stepping back, that Liam wasn't abandoning her out of choice, but out of destiny. And yet, Steffi's pride and her years of holding the family together with duct tape and sheer force of will made her feel like the villain for even wishing Beth's wish wouldn't come true. Because what kind of woman competes with a child's dying heart? Bill Spencer, haunted by his own failures as a father, became relentless. He ordered jet after jet to bring in alternative treatments. CAR T-cell specialists from Switzerland, a Japanese stem cell pioneer, even a shadowy clinic in Singapore that Poppy Nozoa whispered about late one night when she visited Beth with a box of herbs Lee Finnegan immediately confiscated. The family began to fracture in whispers. Ridge told Brooke that Hope's engagement to Carter was morally dead in the water now, while Taylor warned that forcing a reunion under grief could backfire if Beth, against the odds, survived. Bridget and Finn pored over scans and labs, sleepless, fueled by coffee and guilt, wondering if they had missed something, a mutation, a rare trial, a hidden donor match. Then came the twist of fate. Douglas Forrester was tested as a potential donor and came back as a half match. Enough to try a bone marrow transplant that might buy Beth more time, but the procedure would be painful, risky, and it carried no guarantee. Yet Beth, with eyes like fading starlight, smiled bravely and said she wanted to try. But only if Mommy and Daddy are there, together like before. And that was the moment hope broke. She called Carter into the hospital garden, returned his ring, and told him she couldn't be his fiancée when her daughter was asking for a family she still loved. And Carter, though heartbroken, kissed her forehead and told her to follow her heart because a child's wish was worth more than pride. Ivy Forrester called in a video message, saying she would not stand in the way either that Liam had. Always been a man torn between loves, but never as clear as he was now when his daughter's life was on the line. Christmas passed into New Year's with Beth in the ICU, balloons tied to her bed, Wyatt reading her funny poems, Katie Logan bringing in scrapbooks, and even Sheila Carter delivering a stuffed animal through Finn's hands. Tears streaking her cheeks, because for once her chaos was irrelevant to something truly innocent. The transplant went ahead in January, the family holding their breath, Liam and Hope by her side like old times, their wedding bands from the past locked in a glass keepsake on the nightstand as a promise of what might come again. Beth coded twice that night, her tiny heart stopping as alarm screamed, Liam collapsing in sobs against the cold hospital floor while Hope screamed her name. But Bridget and Finn fought like lions, reviving her with chest compressions, epinephrine, and sheer desperation. And when her eyes fluttered open at dawn, she whispered, "Did you kiss yet?" And everyone laughed through their tears, because even in the valley of death she was matchmaking her parents. February brought slow recovery, setbacks, infections, more transfusions, and yet the bond between Hope and Liam knitted tighter each day. their old rhythm returning in hospital hallways and cafeteria coffees, in the quiet courage of shared suffering. Steffi, heartbroken, booked a long trip with Kelly and Hayes to Paris to let Liam heal without pressure. Finn, promising to visit her once Beth stabilized. Ridge and Brooke officiated a small bedside recommitment ceremony for Liam and Hope. Not a legal wedding yet, but a symbolic act to fulfill their daughter's wish. As Beth lay smiling weakly, fingers clutching a bouquet of daisies, and when the news spread through Los Angeles that the great triangle of B&B had paused its wars for a little girl's heartbeat, even the tabloids softened their edges, printing headlines about courage, about family, about the power of love over ego. Yet in March a twist loomed. Scans showed partial remission, but not full, and whispers of a radical surgery in Germany surfaced. A surgery Bill wanted to fund, but Hope feared would be too dangerous, and Liam was torn. Risk losing the last months of her life chasing a miracle, or give her peace with the time they had. Beth, ever the peacemaker in a world of adults who rarely acted like them, whispered that she didn't care about the surgery if it meant her parents stopped fighting. She just wanted them to promise that even if she didn't make it, they would stay a family, love each other, and never let the battles of the past erase the nights they spent by her side. And so spring melted into summer with the Spencers, Logans, and Forresters transformed. Rivalries paused, old flames reignited. And as spring slowly surrendered to the warmth of a California summer, the oncology ward became a revolving door of family faces. Prayers whispered between machine beeps, and the bittersweet laughter of a child far too wise for her years, because Beth, though frail, though sometimes too weak to lift her head from the pillow, had become the beating heart of a war-torn family, a bridge between Spencers, Logans, and Forresters who for years had clawed at each other over pride, passion, and position. Liam Spencer, once torn between Hope and Steffi, found himself anchored to the woman who had given him this miracle child, not by obligation, but by a love rekindled in the shadow of tragedy, a love forged in midnight vigils and whispered promises beside a hospital bed. Hope, her hair pulled back, makeup abandoned, and designer gowns traded for hoodies and worry lines, read fairy tales to Beth in the glow of 4 pumps, while Liam rubbed her back until she fell asleep, their breaths synchronized in a rhythm that once defined their marriage. Carter Walton, having stepped aside with dignity, tried to rebuild his life with work and late-night gym sessions. But his heart still ached each time he saw Hope and Liam's hands intertwined in paparazzi shots, leaving the hospital, knowing it wasn't a tabloid stunt, but a dying child's request made flesh. Steffi Forrester, thousands of miles away in Paris with Kelly and Hayes, wrote long, unsent letters to Liam, letters she burned in the fireplace before mailing, confessing how torn she was, furious that tragedy had rewritten the triangle in Hope's favor, but unable to summon true jealousy in the face of Beth's illness, because in the deepest chambers of her heart, she too was a mother, and she knew that if it were Kelly lying there, she would move heaven and earth to grant her last wish. Finn, now leading Beth's treatment alongside Bridget Forrester, found himself quietly respecting Liam more than ever, because beneath the history, the accusations, the triangle scars, Liam was proving himself not just as a father, but as a man willing to sacrifice reputation, romance, and future for a child's fragile smile. Bill Spencer, restless and furious at the universe, began digging into cutting-edge therapies the FDA had not yet cleared. Gene editing protocols, marrow graft boosters, even whispered of a contact in Tokyo who claimed to have saved terminal children with an untested serum. And though Hope was wary and Bridget warned it could backfire, Bill had already wired a deposit, his heart still haunted by the nights he held Liam as a baby and swore he would never fail his son the way his own father failed him. Brooke Logan became the quiet general in the background, making calls, smoothing over press, bringing food to nurses, and reminding Ridge that this was not about grudges or weddings, but about a little girl who had united their chaotic dynasty. Meanwhile, whispers reached Ivy Forrester in Australia that Liam had moved back into the cabin, that he slept in the chair by Beth's bed, that Hope's engagement was no more, and though her heart clenched at the memory of the man she once loved, she sent a gift anyway, a music box that played Beth's favorite tune, engraved with the words "Family comes first." The transplant continued to show partial remission, but stubborn cancer cells lurked like embers, and by July, Beth's hair was gone, her cheeks pale, her body frail. Yet her spirit glowed brighter than ever, asking Liam and Hope to plan a picnic at the Cliff House Gardens, to read her favorite book, to promise her that even if the next treatment failed, they would not unravel, they would not return to bitterness, they would stay a family. It was that day, under the filtered sun and the sea breeze, that Liam kissed Hope, not out of pity, not out of nostalgia, but out of the fierce, protective, rekindled love that only tragedy can reignite. A kiss Beth saw and clapped weakly for, whispering, "Now it feels like home again." From that moment, the world shifted. Steffi received the photo in Paris and cried. Carter poured himself into work with Katie Logan as his unlikely confidant. Thomas Forrester quietly retreated, respecting his sister's suffering and Hope's path. And Bill, for the first time in years, felt that maybe the Spencer line had a chance to heal its fractures through the smallest, bravest member of the family. Yet August loomed with a dark cloud. A sudden infection set Beth back into ICU, her organs stressed, her breath shallow, the machines louder than ever. And in those nights Liam and Hope slept on either side of her bed, their fingers laced across her chest, whispering promises they weren't sure the universe would let them keep. Sheila Carter arrived one night unannounced, bearing a rare herbal tincture she swore saved her own baby once. And though Finn almost threw her out, Beth's eyes fluttered open and said, "Thank you, Miss Sheila," with a smile that made even the notorious villainess break into tears, because in the face of innocence, even devils remember they were once human. By September, the doctors proposed the last gamble, an experimental marrow cleanse in Germany, dangerous and unapproved, but with a sliver of hope. And Liam turned to Hope beneath the fluorescent lights and said, "If this is her last chance, I'll go, I'll take her, even if it costs everything." And Hope, without hesitation, said, "We go together as a family." And that night they signed the papers, kissed Beth's forehead, and watched the city lights fade as the Spencer jet carried them toward a future uncertain but united. Behind them in Los Angeles, Steffi packed away the last photo of her and Liam. Carter closed the box on the ring that would never see an altar. Ridge and Brooke held hands in silent prayer, Bill, made calls to ensure every resource was ready overseas, and the world held its breath for a child whose wish had already reshaped the landscape of love in the bold and the beautiful universe forever. And when the Spencer jet touched down on the misty tarmac of Munich, the air smelled of rain and metal, a strange coldness that bit through Liam's resolve and made Hope cling to his arm as if the chill might steal their courage. Beth was wheeled out under blankets, her tiny face pale but determined, her voice a whisper as she told the flight nurse she wanted to see snow before the surgery, because in Los Angeles it never snowed and maybe heaven had snow, so she wanted to know what it felt like while she still could. Bill Spencer had already arranged a penthouse near the clinic, the kind of place where power brokers and billionaires stayed while chasing miracles. But he didn't sleep that night, pacing the marble floors, making calls to ensure the German team, led by Professor Dr. Helena Weiss, had the best equipment, the best immunotherapy cocktail, and the backup donors on standby. Hope read fairy tales by the bedside, her voice trembling as Beth interrupted her with questions no parent ever wants to hear. "Will it hurt? Will I awaken? If I don't, will you still be my mother and father together?" Questions that broke Liam in half, making him leave the room to sob silently in the corridor while Finn, who had flown in days earlier to oversee the protocol, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Sometimes the bravest thing a father can do is show up every single day, even when he can't fix it." Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the ripple continued. Steffi Forrester sat by the Seine with a postcard from Beth in her hands, wondering if this was the final chapter for her and Liam, a bittersweet acceptance creeping in as she whispered to Kelly that Daddy was being a hero for someone else right now. Carter threw himself into pro bono cases, But every photo of Hope and Liam in European tabloids reopened the wound he thought was healing. Brooke Logan flew to Germany days later to support her daughter, Ridge arriving behind her despite Taylor's hesitation, because even their decades-long triangle bent its knee to the higher love of a child's wish. The surgery day dawned with a cold sunrise, frost on the windows, a hush in the corridors. Beth kissed her stuffed unicorn, asked for both her parents to hold her hands, and whispered, "If I don't wake up, I want you to kiss for me." And they did, tears mixing as the gurney rolled away. The procedure lasted 9 agonizing hours, marrow cleanse, cell graft, immunoinfusion, during which Liam sat hunched, head in his hands, while Hope stared at the ceiling, praying, bargaining, remembering the night Beth was born and stolen from her. How fate had taken and given the same child twice. Bill yelled at an assistant in the hallway when the Wi-Fi dropped because control was the